We're going to be joined by senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell. Greg, we're still recovering. This is not where we want to begin, but we kind of have to with you.
I know.
I'm gonna stick with the positive here, though, because after 2 weeks of postseason play, Josh Allen leads all quarterbacks in completion percentage, touchdown percentage, total touchdowns, passer rating, and I believe he's right up there for rushing yards as well among quarterbacks. He took his game to an even higher level than I think any of us anticipated. I know you've been on the Josh Allen train for a while. What can you say about the level of quarterbacking we witnessed from him over the first 2 weeks of the playoffs?
Incredibly high level. I mean, I think that there's two things that kind of stood out to me. One is not an X and O thing, but I think there was just a poise and calmness and composure to his game that's not always there, because Josh has always had a tendency to what's the best way to say it? There were times he could always be a little reckless and undisciplined, right? And you'd worry that he might make a bad play. That didn't happen in the two playoff games. There was just a poise to the way in which he played. And the other thing, and you just hope it carries over, and there's no reason to believe it won't, is his ball location has become so much more consistent. You don't see the scatter shot throws. You don't see him throw the ball at someone's feet. It's just he's so much more efficient and precise with his ball placement that you feel now that when he makes a throw that, hey, it's going to be a good throw. And those two things really stood out to me. And I guess one final thing too is I feel that he's very much now more aware of what defenses are trying to do to him. And I think that his ability to eliminate what's not there and isolate what is there is just a beat quicker. And I think that that's a really important step for, you forget he's still a young quarterback, but that's a really important step for a young quarterback.
One of the things I thought about his play and that I thought made it appear different than it has been in the past was his willingness to take, and we talked about this on the show, his willingness to take the quick and easy completion, plus hit all of those easy completions, and it just makes him appear way more poised because, hey, ball's out, easy completion, let's move along. And that gives him a totally different, it gives you a totally different perception of where his head's at.
And I think that's a great point, Steve. And that I think speaks to just his understanding now of the game, is that, hey, if underneath defenders are going to drop back in zone coverage and that 8-yard throw is there, which often becomes a 12 or 13-yard gain, you take that throw. You should take that throw every single time because it impacts the defense. It forces them to change. No, I think that that's a really, really good point. I mean, it's something we've noticed. I think, Chris, you had mentioned that too in that, was it the first New England, the second New England game, I believe, correct? When we talked about that?
Taking the early check down quickly.
Yeah, taking those throws that are there. And, they end up being, important plays in games. They don't seem important at the time, but they are.
Yeah, no question about it. Gabriel Davis, Greg, I mean, this is a guy that I had been saying should be on the field more. He did have an ankle injury that he was fighting through at the beginning of the year. Okay, fine. You've got veteran guys in front of him. Fine. But I argued like midseason. First of all, he's the best blocking receiver you have on the roster to help in the run game. And number two, he is a reliable route runner. And even though he's not a burner, he somehow finds ways to get behind the defense. I know he's benefiting from one-on-one matchups a great deal because of the attention paid to Diggs and maybe to a lesser extent Beasley and the like. But how is this guy not this team's number 2 receiver next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to speak about what happens next year, but I think Davis is probably, it's funny, he's not a burner, I would imagine, in his 40 time, but he's tall. And that's one thing I learned years ago where I would look at taller receivers and I'd say, boy, they don't look real fast. And then they'd get in the NFL and they showed the ability to get on top of corners because stride length is a trait and taller receivers have stride length. And, you talk about that 75-yarder, that was not man coverage, but still, and Ward was playing with outside leverage. And the route by Knox threatened Thornhill because they were in quarters to that side of the field. But you just saw how quickly he got on top of Ward, and that's stride length. So there is a vertical dimension to Davis's game, which, by the way, Chris, as you probably know, he showed that in college.
Yes.
So he's, he may not, as I said, be a 4.4 guy, but he's a tall receiver, and that stride length matters. So we'll see what happens next year, but I would imagine that will be the case. I mean, he certainly came on toward the end of this season.
As we saw this game take place, and it was such a shootout, and it's such a display. And we talk about Josh and how good he was. Most of us should take it for granted, but how good was Mahomes in this game as well?
Obviously, I watched the game. And watching the game and then watching the tape, I thought to myself that I can't remember, and I'm sure there are. I've been doing this a long time. I can't remember everything I've seen in 42 years, but I don't think that either quarterback really made a bad play in this game. I mean, can you guys say that? Do you feel like there were, bad plays an incompletion to me is not necessarily a bad play. Every quarterback throws incompletions, but I don't remember a really bad play in this game by either quarterback. And Mahomes, and we're looking at one right now, this was a special play by Mahomes. And the other thing too, is you could almost make the argument, which might sound crazy, that the Bills pass rush actually did a pretty good job. They got a lot of people around Mahomes. They just couldn't get him to the ground.
Yeah, a lot of missed tackles, a lot of poor tackling on defense. That's probably the one consistent thing that ran through the defensive effort from start to finish in the game. A lot of opportunities to get people on the ground and a lot of missed tackles, both after the catch, as we're seeing here, although this
that was the killer. I mean, obviously the 13 seconds was more of a killer, but this one was a killer as well. They went two-man coverage, and Wallace, undercut it. I mean, he played the coverage. He undercut it, and I think it was Poyer who just took a bad angle, and obviously when you take a bad angle on Tyreek Hill, he's going to run by you.
Yeah, and I would argue sometimes that a lot of these defenders, not just the Bills, but other teams, they don't take a bad angle on Tyreek Hill. He just outruns the angle.
Yeah.
Like, you could be fundamentally sound, and he can still beat you because he's not one step faster than everybody. He's 3 or 4.
Yeah. No, he's super explosive, and he looks healthy now. And what was so interesting about that game, and it's been very interesting, you mentioned it, you asked me how Mahomes played. He didn't throw one ball more than 20 yards in the air from the line of scrimmage. And they've done that a lot this year in recent games. Down the stretch, he's become very much of a timing rhythm thrower, hit the back foot, let the ball come out. So Mahomes, which is crazy to say because his first 3 years were certainly outstanding, and he's been in back-to-back Super Bowls, winning one of them. But I think he actually has evolved and gotten better as a quarterback because of his understanding. We talked about Josh. I mean, to me, one area of Josh's game that's improved dramatically, as we said, is his patience, his willingness to take the easy throw when the defense gives it to you, to stay on schedule throws. He's so much more decisive with a better understanding and feel for situational football. I think you could say almost the same thing about Mahomes.
Right. So, and your thoughts now as we kind of spin it forward, the 2 championship games coming up, Cincinnati headed into Kansas City, the Rams, and 49ers. What do you think about these 2 games and your thoughts in overarching generalized?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to go with these games, as there always are, as you know, Steve. I mean, there's so many elements and dimensions to these games as there really are to any game. But Joe Burrow's obviously played extremely well, but their O-line, I just feel like that has to become a really meaningful issue at some point. It's a very poor pass protecting O-line. Obviously, he got sacked 9 times, but they played a team who's foundationally is not an explosive team. That's not going to be the case this week. And The Chiefs have very good pass rushers as well in Jones, in Clark, in Ingram, who's kind of a wild card, even Jaron Reed. So, I just feel that particular flaw in their offense is going to at some point be a problem in terms of winning and losing. And because the Chiefs are not going to score 16 points.
Right. And we should note that, the Bengals did play them this season and did come back from a 21-7 deficit to beat them 34-31. The Bengals' number one receiver might be better than the Chiefs' number one. What do you think?
Chase, you mean better than, Chase is probably more complete. He's obviously a bigger man. Chase is really solidly built, and his lower body is almost like that of a running back. Chase is very, very good. On that side of the ball, one thing that I would look for in this game is I would expect the Chiefs maybe to play some more two-man coverage as opposed to single high man coverage, because there were so many throws outside the numbers on fade balls. And, as you guys know, and here you're looking at one, it was the 18-yard touchdown against Ward, who actually had good coverage on a number of them. But when you're playing single high coverage, if you're going to throw fade balls outside the numbers, that post safety has zero chance of being a factor on those kinds of throws. So it would not surprise me to see a little more two-man coverage.
Right. What about the NFC side of the ledger?
Yeah, Niners have beat the Rams 6 times in a row.
Why?
Greg.
Yeah, you've got to have a feel for why the Niners have got the Rams number.
Well, here's what I'll say. I think I do have a feel. I don't know how this game will play out. The Niners are a very physical team on both sides of the ball, particularly offensive line, defensive line. And offensively, the Niners play out of 21 personnel, meaning they play with 2 backs, and Kyle Juszczyk is on the field probably 40 to 50% of their snaps. So what that does is it makes the Rams play out of base, and it minimizes the impact and at times eliminates the impact of Donald as a pass rusher. It actually almost eliminates Von Miller. Von Miller is a pass rusher. He's not really a run defender. So we always think of those guys, hey, they're going to sack the quarterback. That's not really the way the Niners play offense. So they're able to control the game, negate the pass rush traits and abilities of the Rams defensive front, and they control the game. And then the 49ers D-line and their linebackers have played at such a high level over the last 6 weeks or so. So they physically have beaten up the Rams, Steve. And, I know we don't think about football, and particularly when you think of what the Chiefs and the Bills just did with the quarterbacks and going up and down the field and the running games not really being a factor. The Niners may be a little old school, but they physically beat you up.
Yeah, and Rams are a good team. You beat them 6 times in a row as a division opponent. You know them, they know you. It just screams lousy matchup for the Rams.
You're right, though. If they put Juszczyk on the field, you've got to counter that.
Yeah.
And if your counter to that isn't as good as their 2 guys, Juszczyk on the field, you can't get out of it.
No, and the reality is Kyle Shanahan is so good with run game design. And, people don't think of the run game as being designed because they think, you just line up and you hit people in the mouth. But as you know, Steve, there's so much that goes into the run game with angles and leverage and dictating and eliminating run support. That was the thing Joe Gibbs did for years and years in his first tenure with Washington, is I think they had 3 running plays, but they used a lot of motion because it impacts run support by the defense, as you know. And Shanahan is so good at that. And he's also really good in the pass game, even when Juszczyk's on the field with his route concepts at attacking and breaking down zone coverage. And the Rams, quite honestly, they play a lot of zone. People are probably always surprised by that. They don't really play a lot of man, and they don't use Ramsey that often as a matchup corner.
Right.
All right, Greg, thanks for breaking those games down for us. We appreciate it. Enjoy Conference Championship weekend.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've already started to take a peek at college quarterbacks, so I'm
oh my gosh, he can't help himself.
I want to stay ahead of Tasker. I'm sure he's way, probably.
Oh yeah, he's elbow deep and
nose to the grindstone.
Oh, yeah.
Greg, nose to the grindstone.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Greg. Have a good weekend.
Greg. Appreciate it.